The following is a presentation of the Pro Wrestling Report. Informative, entertaining, and real since 1998.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Pro Wrestling Report post-show. It's the post-show for TNA Lockdown, which was just on pay-per-view a few minutes ago from Nashville, Tennessee. Damian Nelson along with David Hero coming to you here from the PWR studios. And we want to welcome you, joining us wherever you are all over the world. And we want to invite you to interact with us all throughout the show tonight. We are on Twitter. Twitter username is @PWR Show. Follow us on Twitter and get all the shenanigans, if you will, as to what's going on and our thoughts on wrestling events and more as they happen. Also on Facebook right now, you can go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/PWR Show, and vote. Pass or fail, your opinion, if you watched it, of TNA Lockdown. Pass or fail. Not one match, not one thing that happened, but the overall show. What do you rate it, pass or fail? It was a night that was built around the TNA World Championship matchup, a night that had a main event for that title. Every match was in a cage tonight, and every match had a reason behind it, and there were a lot of title matchups tonight, and I'm very, very ready to hear your opinions on the pay-per-view. We're going to be taking your phone calls here in this program. The number, 347-996-5278. Again, that's 347-996-5278. We'll go into the phone zone in the second half of the program here. But David Hero, tonight, Bobby Roode retains the TNA World Heavyweight Championship, and it seems as if from the likes of what's happening on Twitter and here in the chat room on Blog Talk Radio, a lot of people not happy with Bobby Roode sneaking one out again over the hometown boy, James Storm.
How funny is it? Because you got to figure back at Bound for Glory, everybody was pissed off that Bobby Roode didn't beat Kurt Angle.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, hey, you know what? Listen, I give TNA credit. They are running with Bobby Roode. They are letting him be the guy. Obviously, he's doing something right. He's been the cowardly heel. He backed into a big win tonight. And James Storm wasn't downgraded. I mean, he didn't get hurt by it whatsoever. James Storm beat himself. It happens often. You know, look at Morocco in the cage. You know, I mean, there's always that way the heel can beat the babyface in a cage match, and it doesn't matter if his wife and friends in hometown were there to watch it. His wife and friends in hometown were pretty quiet for most of the night.
I think you got to give credit where credit's due. TNA did a tremendous job building this match from the beginning of the pay-per-view through the end of the pay-per-view. There was clearly nothing more important tonight than this main event championship matchup between Roode and Storm, and that's something they've not done so well in the past. Now, it's arguable whether they made this pay-per-view a must-see event, but two things. The aforementioned fact that they did do so much to make this match so important, and then secondly, the fact that in the main event tonight, on this pay-per-view Lockdown, two homegrown TNA talents carried the show.
Well, and they did. And, you know, I think one of the things that we're kind of not talking about also that made the pay-per-view better than it could have been great if the crowd was into it. But one of the things that TNA corrected tonight, as far as from what I saw, is that there was 7 different matches, right? Let's say. Each match was different. You didn't see the same spots multiple times tonight,
right?
Which has been a problem in TNA in the past. And especially when you have the same working environment, when they're all in a cage, you would expect to see more of the same things. I mean, only 2 matches had color. Only one match the guy went over the top, and the other guy went through the door. The rest were all pinfalls. I thought that as far as where the matches were mapped out, produced, or agented, I think they did a great job. It's just unfortunate that it took the crowd 2 hours to wake up.
Well, and you got to wonder if TNA did the right thing at the end of the night tonight, because they didn't do what a lot of people talk about has to be done on wrestling pay-per-views, which is send the crowd home happy. This
crowd didn't deserve to be sent home happy.
They didn't. Really?
They weren't. Listen, they weren't into anything. They weren't even truly booing Garett Bischoff. It just seemed like they were ushered in. Here, take a seat. And you know what? I mean, it was, you only heard one person chanting. You know what I mean? I mean, it was just the most kabuki-ish crowd they've ever been in front of that I can think of.
Thus
in a long time.
A great kabuki-ish crowd?
Absolutely. I mean, hell, I would have rather had the great kabuki in the crowd. At least there would have been some fire. I mean, it just seemed like they were sitting on their hands most of the time. And, you know, you can say that it was half full, a quarter full, 3/4 full, sold out, whatever it is. I have been in buildings where there have been 100-some people, and that crowd gets loud. Okay? Yeah. They did it. This was not a wrestling audience that was there. It just seems like it was a big reunion of corporate business people or what. I don't know who was there. It just, I didn't get the wrestling fan feel from the crowd. And you know what? Maybe I wasn't paying that close attention to it.
Oh no, you were.
But I don't remember a whole lot of shots of the audience where they would zoom in on signs or different fans in costumes or whatnot.
Yeah, that's a good point. It seemed like it was more important to TNA that they were in Nashville than it was to anybody else who had bought tickets to get there.
It's their hometown, you know, and
yeah. But
you know
granted, it's not an apples-to-apples comparison, but when you compare New York and WWE and being so happy to be in Madison Square Garden, the fans realize how important that is as well. Granted, they've been doing it for 30, 40 years, but at the same time, there were some good matches on this pay-per-view tonight. Some matches, though, that left me questioning why they went in the direction they did. And what I felt was an overall solidly built pay-per-view, we saw it start off with the Lethal Lockdown matchup. And, David, I was impressed with what they did with Garett Bischoff before this matchup started, which would ultimately lead, that promo he did, asking for his chance to prove himself, would ultimately lead to him pinning his father, Eric Bischoff, in the middle of the ring, thus causing Eric Bischoff to have to not only leave TNA, but no longer use the Bischoff name.
Amazing, isn't it? I mean, you know what? Listen, I do not envy Garett Bischoff one bit. I would hate to be put in that spot where no one thinks you deserve it, no one thinks you're good enough, and he still goes out there and he busts his ass.
Yeah.
Let's face it. I will give Garett Bischoff credit where credit is due. The kid is trying. Is he the future of wrestling? Probably not. You know, I mean, will he have a career? Who knows? But at the end of the day, I will give the kid credit. He's trying. He went out there tonight and took a beating. And some of those guys laid into him, and, you know, with some stiff chops, punches, kicks, whatever it was. I just thought it was amazing that you had 10 other really talented guys in that ring, or 8 other talented guys in that ring, doing amazing things. And all those big spots they did was to build up to Eric Bischoff beating his son with a kendo stick.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, wow, who would have thought all that stuff would lead to this, to that moment? And then, of course, you know, hitting him with the guitar and beating his dad. I really was hoping that somebody on Team Garett would have sided with Eric Bischoff and cost his team to win.
Yeah.
Because, you know, let's face it, Garett Bischoff is going to be booed at the next TNA Impact taping. Well, so would his father.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just let the bigger catcalls come out for Eric instead of Garett and find a way to bring Garett back. Maybe he comes back under a mask or whatever else it is.
Black Scorpion?
I'm sorry?
Black Scorpion?
Yeah, absolutely. How funny would that be that the Black Scorpion comes back into TNA to then haunt Ric Flair and Eric Bischoff?
I don't understand why it has to be a black scorpion. It could be a white one or an orange one or a gray one or a purple one as well.
Well, because the white hood would be a little awkward. He has to wear the black hood.
The TNA Tag Team Championships were on the line as Samoa Joe teamed with Magnus, and they successfully defeated the Motorcity Machine Guns in what felt like a short match that showed dominance by Magnus and Joe.
You know, that match, if they would have had another couple weeks to build it up, maybe to get the Machine Guns to fine-tune to lose some of that ring rust, I think that match could have been awesome. They didn't need a cage. You know, they really didn't. There was no true heat between the two teams. There's no bad blood. Why have it in the cage? They didn't use the cage as a prop throughout the match.
Right.
It just seems like they blew a great chance, and unfortunately, the Machine Guns had, they did the clean job. They put them over clean, and boy, Lockdown just needs 2 or 3 cage matches. You don't need 7 or 8.
Speaking of losing, Robbie E. was unsuccessful in his efforts to retain his TNA, or regain rather, his TNA television championship against Devon, who again seemingly was made to look much stronger in this matchup, not only in the actions in the ring, but in the commentary by Taz and TNA.
But I just don't get it. I mean, I like Devon. No disrespect. You know what? He is an amazing talent. He has had a fantastic run. But how does Devon help Robbie E. and Rob Terry?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's what you have to look at. It's like, I could see if it was the Pope,
Who?
The Pope, the Pope, your boy the Pope, Popalicious. I could see if it was Daniels or Kaz or, somebody else, but Devon's a part-time guy right now.
Yeah.
And, it just doesn't make sense. Now, let's hope that on Impact this week, Robbie E. and Devon have another match on TV for the TV title, and maybe the switch happens there. Who knows? But I really think that, having Devon beat Robbie E. doesn't help Robbie E. at one bit.
And clearly, it seems as if that's going to continue forward with the beatdown by Rob Terry and Robbie E. after the matchup on Devon. The Knockouts Championship stays around the waist of Gail Kim in what was a spectacular Knockouts matchup. And you would expect nothing less from Gail Kim, but a lot of people surprised with her opponent's abilities in the ring in this matchup tonight.
Well, I mean, Velvet Sky, she's a talented girl, and she's in the ring with Gail Kim, who I consider to be one of the very best divas and or knockouts. What she does is she's snug, she makes it look good. It looks like she's beating the hell out of you when she's in the ring with you. And I joke about Alicia Fox. Gail Kim took Alicia Fox under her wing and made her a better wrestler.
Yeah.
Much like she will do with anyone that she gets into the ring with. Gail Kim is talented. She came up through the indies. She worked in different territories. She's not one of them. She is not one of these bikini, model girls that was, in a diva search and says, "Hey, I want to try to win $250,000." Gail Kim wanted to be a wrestler, and she proves it every single time she goes in the ring.
Ric Flair showed some promise when he came down to the ring back in a tie, which we haven't seen him in TNA for a while. It's those little things, those details that matter. He was confronted after being called out, confronted by Hulk Hogan. Now, at this point in time, I thought to myself, wow, there are two of arguably the greatest performers in the history of the business standing in the middle of the ring. And me, right here, right now, while watching Lockdown, didn't really care. Is that wrong?
Well, it's because you were part of that audience that was watching the first 2 hours before you woke up. I'm thinking, how can you have two legends, two Hall of Famers, two of the biggest icons in the history of pro wrestling, standing dead center in the middle of a cage and not have any build-up for it?
Right.
Not even tease the audience that, hey, you might see Hogan and Flair in a cage together.
Yeah.
I mean, it's little things like that, and, who knows why that, certain things don't get announced or addressed or whatnot. But, boy, I tell you, you almost got to wonder, was Flair and Hogan brought out to try to wake up the crowd?
Yeah, good point. Good point.
Because, you got the Woos and you got the brothers and you got, stuff going back and forth, and it seems like Flair stayed out a little bit longer than he was supposed to, but, hell, they tried everything else.
Here's what I loved about it. Here's what I loved about it. Ric Flair was back to being crazy a little bit again tonight. Today, you want some of this? And that's really, and that goes back to his WCW days. Towards the end of WCW, Flair was tremendous when he was nuts. Remember him doing elbow drops on his jacket and his Florida Gator boxers, and when he was in the home and stuff like that. That could be the right thing for Flair to be doing right now. We got a little bit of that tonight.
I want to know who the jabroni was in the audience that was staring at Hulk Hogan standing next to him, not seeing that $500 dress shoe smacking him in the side of the head.
Honestly, a shoe? Who uses a shoe?
You know what I mean? It's like, wow, you know someone got hit in the head because they weren't paying attention.
Matt Morgan was not successful in ending the undefeated streak of Crimson. Crimson remains undefeated after climbing out of the top of the cage and hitting the floor.
And you know what? They never even mentioned in the first 3 or 4 matches prior to that you could win the match by going over the top rope. At least I didn't hear it.
Yeah,
and
it was mentioned. I might have been on the pre-show, actually. I don't know. You could be right about it within the pay-per-view, but I think it was mentioned in the pre-show, which, again, doesn't help it. It should be mentioned on the actual broadcast.
But they did a nice job of telling us about it as the match started.
Uh-huh.
And what a great way for Crimson to stay undefeated by beating him, by outsmarting him, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not pinning him, not making him tap, but just to be a little more athletic, a little bit, 2 steps ahead, and jump over the top of that cage and win that way. Well done.
ODB teaming up with Eric Young. They are the Knockouts Tag Team Champions. They are recently married as well. They defeated Sarita and Rosita, retaining those Knockouts Championship belts.
Talk about Eric Young having the night off every time he has to defend those knockout belts. I mean, it's almost like watching Road Dogg and Billy, where Road Dogg would go in there and take all the heat, and then just make the hot tag to Billy, where he comes in and gets the famous and the win. I mean, Eric Young doesn't do anything. I mean, he goes out there and he has women flirt with him the whole time, and then ODB does all the work. But you know what? They're very entertaining, and it's going to be interesting when they eventually do take the knockout belts off of those two, how they're going to do it. I mean, let's face it. Marriages usually screw stuff up, so I can't imagine those knockout titles staying around their waist much longer.
The match of the night, likely to be called the match of the night, was Kurt Angle versus Jeff Hardy. They woke the crowd up, as you mentioned earlier, David Hero. The crowd definitely into this matchup. Jeff Hardy gets the win at this pay-per-view in a matchup with Kurt Angle, who, they both did all the stuff we talked about on Primetime Wednesday night. They took chances, they took risks, they had the high spots, they had the big moves. But I think the pacing of this matchup was strong regardless of that, because sometimes that stuff gets in the way. I do believe these two men told a great story in the ring tonight as well.
Well, I think what helped with the audience also is if it was a casual wrestling fan audience, they recognized Kurt Angle and Jeff Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if that crowd really wasn't going to pop for all those weapons in the first match, think about it. They really didn't pop for that a whole lot.
Right.
But all of a sudden you see Kurt Angle. Oh, yeah, I remember Kurt Angle. Oh, Jeff Hardy, absolutely, Jeff Hardy. Those two guys went out there, and they told a great story. They were obviously given plenty of time, and Kurt Angle is a meticulous ring general, where I'm sure he's gone over that match with Jeff a dozen times. They had all their spots picked out. And you know what? You can tell Jeff Hardy is a changed individual by when he went for that swanton off the top of the cage, he made sure that he took care of Kurt Angle. Because I'm thinking, boy, this could go really wrong. These two guys could get really hurt, and Jeff Hardy took the brunt of that move.
We are listening and watching all of your comments, not only on Twitter, but here in the chat room on Blog Talk Radio as well. And David, I think you'll like this question, which was submitted by a fan by the name of Philip Broom, who says, and I quote, "Why have a cage match when you win by leaving?" And response from NJ Brock 22 saying, "Well, that's the old rules of cage matches." Maybe we should take this moment to educate newer wrestling fans as to what a cage match used to be, which was absent of a referee inside the cage, because the only way you could win was to climb up top of that 15-foot high steel cage and climb out and both feet hit the floor. That's old school.
Oh, right. What it was done for when the babyface kept chasing the heel, and the heel would lose by countout or disqualification, or maybe it was because the heel had a faction with them that would keep people out. It was the way that they would guarantee where, hey, the heel could not run away, and it was given it was always the matched out end of feud, and that's what it was. And then I think for me that's why it's so awkward to watch a whole pay-per-view of cage matches when you really only had three legitimate feuds on the whole show.
Yeah. As we said, we're also on Twitter. This one, as we continue Comedy Hour here, I guess. A person who was in attendance, I believe, at the pay-per-view in Tennessee tonight, Rob Francois 2011, at Rob Francois 2011, says, "See, James Storm lost in his hometown. Someone tell Bret Hart to quit his bitching."
Well, and, if you think about it, how many times have guys in the WWE lost in their hometown?
Dozens, if not always, lately.
It just seems like it.
But, yeah.
With the exception of Punk, most of the guys do the jobs in their hometowns. With the exception of Punk and Rock, it doesn't happen very often.
Overall, David Hero, what would you score this pay-per-view? Pass or fail? Having fought it on pay-per-view.
You know what? I think it was a passing pay-per-view. I think just because the crowd wasn't into it doesn't mean it wasn't a good show. I think that the show was well booked. It wasn't overbooked, which normally is what happens on the TNA pay-per-view. I think the finishes made sense. It protected certain people. And, for me, it was a passing grade.
All right. Well, we're going to be going to your phone calls in just a minute. The number you can call, 347-996-5278. Again, that's 347-996-5278. Want to hear your comments on TNA Lockdown. This is the Pro Wrestling Report post-show talking about Lockdown, where Bobby Roode defeated James Storm to retain the TNA Championship. More right after this timeout here on the post-show.
Don't forget to follow PWR right here on Blog Talk Radio right now. Be reminded of upcoming episodes and never miss Blog Talk Radio's most popular sports show. Follow PWR now. Follow us on Twitter for breaking news, live wrestling chat, and pure hilarity. Head over to twitter.com/PWR show and be part of the conversation. This is the Pro Wrestling Report. Informative, entertaining, real. Missed an episode on the Pro Wrestling Report? Thanks, pal. Subscribe to the show on iTunes and take the show with you wherever you go, even in the bathroom.
And we're back here, ladies and gentlemen, on the post-show talking about TNA Lockdown, which was tonight live on pay-per-view from Nashville, Tennessee. Damian Nelson along with David Hero. I want to remind all of you that coming up this Wednesday night, 2012 Pro Wrestling Report Draft on a very special edition of PWR Primetime Wednesday. And I'm almost, David, I've determined who my number one pick is going to be since I won the coin toss on Wednesday's edition of Primetime. And I'm so giddy about it, I almost want to tell the world already.
Well, please do.
It's got you all choked up, obviously.
You know what? I'm looking forward to the draft. I know. I just see how you've already now tried to, in some shenanigans and nonsense and try to take advantage of a situation. That's fine. I get it, but it'll be fine. In the end, the Super Friends will come out on top, and, I'll make sure there's no more Heath Slater nonsense.
Hey, you know what? Heath Slater proved to be one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable asset tonight in the draft. Or last year in the draft, rather. That's Wednesday, 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. You'll be able to see it first at pwrshow.com, the 2012 Pro Wrestling Report Draft. Let's now go to the phones, and we're going to acknowledge you by the area code from which you're calling from. And then please tell us your name and state the location that you're calling from. And let us go ahead and address your question or comment. We're talking about TNA Lockdown, where Bobby Roode retained the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Kurt Angle loses to Jeff Hardy. Crimson's undefeated streak continues. Gail Kim retains the Knockouts Championship. And so much more, including Garett Bischoff defeating Eric Bischoff and seemingly pushing Eric Bischoff out of TNA Wrestling. Magnus and Joe retain the tag titles. Devon is still the television champion. And ODB and Eric Young are still the TNA Knockouts Tag Team Champions. Let's go to our first caller, calling us from the 269 area code. Caller, what's your name and where are you calling from?
Hey, this is David from Michigan.
What up there, David from Michigan?
Hey, I just got back from the movies, actually, watching Lockdown at the movies. It was pretty sweet, actually.
That was a good experience?
Yeah, but there's only 7 people there.
7?
7.
Wow.
When I walked into the movie theater, there was nothing on the outside board, nothing about Lockdown. I walked inside, nothing about Lockdown. All the way to the very end where the poster's right next to the door is where you see the Lockdown poster.
And you know what? This is actually quite a great idea. Something that I believe WWE does in Canada for TNA to get this available out into different vehicles. But they do have to promote it. And I do believe TNA did a good enough job of promoting it. But if you got a pool of 1.5 million people you're promoting it to who watch Impact each week, once you go across the 300 million people in this country, it gets diluted a little bit and people may not get the message. But wow, 7 people. I guess that means the line
they
for
doubled their money.
I'm sorry?
They doubled their money at least.
Yeah, true. Very true. What did you think of the pay-per-view?
I mean, it started off really slow. I mean, even during the Motor City match, I thought was kind of funny. I heard Motor City chants in Nashville, which I was like, okay.
It's like the USA chants when there's a Canadian in the ring.
Yeah. But the match that woke everybody up in the theater, all 7 of us, was Kurt Angle and Jeff Hardy. I mean, but that match just took, like David Hero said on Twitter, it just stole the show. And I mean, after Jeff Hardy jumped off, after he did his angle slams, and then we seen the swanton from the top of the cage, it's like, wow, that was old Jeff Hardy. I mean, that reminded me of TLC when he did it.
Yeah.
The crazy ladder.
And your thoughts on Bobby Roode retaining the championship?
I was kind of torn between both because I like them both. And so it didn't really matter to me. I was like, okay, I don't care who wins. I know it's going to be a great match. And you could see the super kick coming. I mean, you could just see him standing right by the door when he kicked out of it. I was like, okay.
Well,
I mean,
Brian Hebner
it was
could
a
see
good
it coming.
match.
All right, David, would you say pass or fail for this pay-per-view from TNA tonight?
I think Jeff Hardy and Kurt Angle made it a pass, right? There were those 2 right there.
All right, sounds like a passing vote. Thank you so much for your call, David from out in Michigan, especially for those details on your live theater viewing experience. Let's go to our next phone caller coming to us from the 262 area code. Caller from the 262, you are live here on the Post Show.
Hey, Mr. All Hail King Damien. This is Saul Perez.
Hello, Saul Perez.
Kenosha. Yes,
co-holder of the PWR Fan of the Year titles from 2011. Welcome to the Post Show.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. How are you, sir?
Absolutely fantastic.
Mr. Hero, how are you?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
Just got doing pretty good, actually. Thank you for asking. I think tonight's lockdown was pretty decent. I agree with you, though, David, about the crowd. I think the crowd just ruined it for me because it was a good idea to start off the pay-per-view with the lethal lockdown, just to get the crap match out of the way, because quite frankly, I was really tired of the whole Bischoff angle because it was just a waste of TV time in my opinion. That's just how I view it. But the fact of the matter was the crowd really ruined everything. I mean, they had some really good quality matches, but I think pretty much throughout the pay-per-view. But just the crowd was so off tonight, it really ruined it for me. But definitely Hardy and Angle stole the show for me. I agree. That was I think that was their Undertaker Triple H match from WrestleMania. I think that was matching that. I would say it was the match of the year.
Wow, fantastic.
For TNA, I don't think. Yeah.
For TNA. Definitely for TNA. Definitely.
Well, Saul, would you give it a pass or fail tonight? TNA lockdown overall.
Well, I would definitely give it a pass, but I would say it was like a C+ pass because if it wasn't for the crowd, it would have definitely been like a pay-per-view because, like I said, the crowd really ruined it because they were really off and it just, they only cheered in spots, but like you could tell like the crowd wasn't totally into the pay-per-view. But definitely, as far as the wrestling, definitely I would give it a pass.
Thank you so much for that call, Sal Perez, one half of the Pro Wrestling Report Fan of the Year from 2011. Thanks so much for joining us here on the post show. David, I guess from a little bit of perspective, we were at Lockdown last year in Cincinnati, which was the last TNA event. I've been since to the Impact Zone, but there was the last one that we had seen on the road, actually the first one. Or second or third one we've seen on the road. And I don't remember the crowd in Cincinnati being as dull as the Nashville crowd tonight. Was it the card? Was it the matches? Is there something we're missing as to what didn't spark this crowd tonight? Was there a Predators game on? Was there some other sport going on that maybe they were more in tune with?
I think there was just a little more star power last year. There was the return of AJ Styles, which was a surprise.
Yeah.
You had Hogan, you had Sting, you had Flair, you had RVD versus Sting versus Ken Anderson, I believe it was one of the main events. You had Fortune against Immortal.
Yeah.
It just seemed like they had more matches that were built up, and you know what? Cincinnati and Nashville, even though they are rather similar in logistics, it's two different kinds of wrestling crowds, and I don't think that it was a wrestling audience tonight in Nashville. But who knows? I mean, at the end of the day, I guess it comes down to the guys in the ring performing to get the crowd into it. I thought the guys did a great job, but obviously it wasn't good enough to get whatever they had in attendance motivated. Because how many times do we just hear one person chanting something?
Right. All right, well, let's go to our final caller of the evening, and that caller is coming to us from the 321 area code. Caller from the 321, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is David, calling from Orlando.
Hey, David from Orlando.
Hey, I think you guys do an awesome show, and I just wanted to, especially with you guys going to...
Oh, it looks like we lost David. Sorry about that. If you want to give us a call back in, you can. That call dropped for some reason. We apologize for that. But,
I bet you hung up on him.
No, not at all. He was about to say good things about me.
All right. I'm making sure here. I'm watching you.
We've asked you to head on over to our Facebook page all night long and vote on TNA Lockdown. Was it a passing or a failing pay-per-view? And David Hero looks like it's almost right down the middle. However, edging out with just a few more percentage points was fail on this pay-per-view versus pass. Now, I got to say this. I know that in both cases, but more so with TNA, a lot of people vote on these surveys that we put on Facebook who never watched the show. They're reporting or they're voting based off of what they heard. And I think if you read the results for this show, you'd probably be pissed off without seeing it. But you had to see this one to really give it the appreciation it is due, because if you just read that Roode won, you think how stupid that is. But if you see how Roode won, which is just getting kicked in the chin out of the door to the cage, it makes all the sense in the world. You may think it's silly that Crimson is still undefeated, but at the same time, it made sense, as you said. I don't think there's any controversy with the Angle and Hardy matchup, but I'm sure a lot of people are upset that Garett Bischoff getting the pin. But again, I think that made all the sense in the world. Let's go back to David in Orlando. David, I think we've got you back on now.
Yeah, sorry, I think I dropped the call.
That's all right. Go ahead with your question or comment, please.
Like I said, I don't really have a question on the pay-per-view tonight. Hardy and Angle definitely put on a show. I think you guys said earlier the Machine Guns and Magnus was great if they just had a little more time. My question is more hypothetical. If you think Jeff Hardy seems happy where he is, but hypothetically, if he went back to WWE with the Machine behind him, do you think he'd still be a top 5 guy merchandise-wise? I mean, you got Cena, Punk, maybe Ray when he comes back, but I think Hardy would still be on top if he were to go back there.
Yeah, thank you for that call, David from Orlando. Go ahead, Dave.
Hardy has the ability to be one of the top guys, but there's no way Cena, Punk, and all those other guys will let that happen. There's no way. And Vince wouldn't let that happen, where a guy from TNA would come back in right away and go straight to the top.
All right. Thank you for those comments, Dave, and thank you to all of you who joined us here tonight on the post show. Again, big week coming up at the Pro Wrestling Report. We want to remind you, tomorrow night we'll be on the Meltdown talking about WWE Raw, taking your phone calls again right here on Blog Talk Radio. And then Wednesday we'll be with a very special edition of the Pro Wrestling Report Primetime Television. It's the 2012 Draft, moderated by Mike Wickett of WSSP Sports Radio 1250, right over here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. That is going to be at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. You can first see it at pwrshow.com and then on the app. If you have the iPhone or Android app, you can go ahead and pick up the Pro Wrestling Report on that before anybody else gets a chance to see it. And then on Saturday night, it's Fan Appreciation Night, a question and answer, fan-dedicated edition of the Pro Wrestling Report Prime Time, available on My 24 Milwaukee, our home station right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Keep the conversation going via Twitter, at PWR Show on Twitter. We're also on Twitter individually, at Damian Nelson and at David Hero. Also on Facebook, facebook.com/PWR Show, facebook.com/PWR Show. TNA Lockdown is in the books. Bobby Roode retains the TNA World Heavyweight Championship. Much more discussion coming up over the course of the next few days right here on the Pro Wrestling Report. For David Hero, this is Damian Nelson saying thank you so much for joining us here live for the TNA Lockdown post show on Blog Talk Radio. We'll see you soon, everyone.
Don't forget to follow PWR right here on Blog Talk Radio right now. Be reminded of upcoming episodes and never miss Blog Talk Radio's most popular sports show. Follow PWR now.